Hey everybody, and welcome back. I'm very excited to talk to you today about a couple other very interesting and unique and exciting myths. And without further ado, I would like to go ahead and start with Delaire's Hera. Hera, the beautiful queen of Olympus, was a very jealous wife. Even Zeus, who was afraid of nothing, feared her fits of temper. She hated all his other wives, and when Zeus first asked her to be his wife, she refused. Slyly, Zeus created a thunderstorm, changed himself into a little cuckoo, and pretending to be in distress, he flew into Hera's arms for protection. She pitied the wet little bird and hugged it close to keep it warm. But all of a sudden, she found herself holding mighty Zeus in her arms instead of the bird. Thus, Zeus won Hera, and all nature burst into bloom for their wedding. Mother Earth gave the bride a little apple tree that bore golden apples of immortality. Hera treasured the tree and planted it in the garden of the Hesperides, her secret garden far to the west. She put 100-headed dragon under the tree, named Ladon, by the way, to guard the apples and ordered the three nymphs of the Hesperides to water and care for the tree. Now, just real quick, of course, Hera is jealous because Zeus is constantly making her jealous. He is always running around with other mortals and immortals. Always. So I think she gets a bad rap as being called jealous. I think maybe justified in her jealousy or justified in her anger might be a better way to describe that. I mean, if Zeus was a mortal man, I'm sure Hera would have killed him about 17 times over. All right, anyway, and that would have been a crime of passion, right? And we could have pled crime of passion. Okay, Zeus loved Hera dearly, but he was also very fond of rocky Greece. He often sneaked down to Earth in disguise to marry mortal girls. The more wives he had, the more children he would have, and all the better for Greece. Yes, because he is so great. Uh, I mean, here's the thing though, he is immortal, so hubris doesn't necessarily apply to him. All his children would inherit some of his greatness and become great heroes and rulers. But Hera, in her jealous rage, tormented his other wives and children, and even Zeus was powerless to stop her. She knew how tricky Zeus could be and kept very close watch over him. One day, as Hera looked down on Earth, she spied a small, dark thundercloud where no cloud should have been. She rushed down and jumped into the cloud. Zeus was there just as she had suspected, but with him was only a little snow white cow. He had seen Hera coming, and to protect his newest bride, Io, from her wrath, he had changed the girl into a cow. Alas! The cow was as lovely as the girl, and Hera was not deceived. She pretended to suspect nothing and begged Zeus to let her have the dainty cow. Zeus could not well refuse his queen such a little wish without giving himself away, and he had to give her the cow. Hera tied poor Io to a tree and sent her servant Argus to watch over her. And you can see the picture of this all played out here too. You see Argus as this big giant brute with 100 eyes, all wide open for watching at all times. And you can see the little peacock bird, but it looks differently from how we normally see it depicted. You'll find out why shortly. And you can see Io, the dainty, beautiful little sweet white cow. And you can see the golden apples of the Hesperides back in the background. Argus had 100 bright eyes placed all over his body. He was so big and strong that single-handedly he had made an end to the monstrous Echidna, who had lived in a cave and had devoured all who had passed by. He was Hera's faithful servant and the best of watchmen, for he never closed more than half of his eyes in sleep at a time. Now, if you remember from our previous myth, Echidna was the wife of Typhon, the last monstrous offspring of Gaia that challenged Zeus, and Echidna gave birth to all of those other monsters. Argus sat down next to the cow and watched her with all his eyes, and poor Io had to walk on four legs and eat grass. She raised her mournful eyes to Olympus. Zeus was so afraid of Hera that he did not dare to help her. At last, he could no longer bear to see her distressed, and he asked his son Hermes, the craftiest of the gods, to run down to earth and set Io free. Hermes disguised himself as a shepherd and walked up to Argus, playing a tune on his shepherd's pipe. Argus was bored, having nothing to do with all his eyes but watch a little cow, and he was glad to have music and company. Hermes sat down beside him, and after he had played for a while, he began to tell a long and dull story. It had no beginning and it had no end, and 50 of Argus's eyes closed in sleep. Hermes droned on, and slowly the 50 other eyes fell shut, one by one. Quickly, Hermes touched all the eyes with his magic wand and closed them forever in eternal sleep. Argus had been bored to death, which I'm sure you're not bored to death right now, right? I can only assume you're eagerly listening to everything that's going to unfold. Hermes then untied the cow, and Io ran home to her father, the river god Inachos. He did not recognize the cow as his daughter, and Io could not tell him what had happened. All she could say was moo. But when she lifted up her little hoof and scratched her name, Io, in the river sand, her father at once understood what had happened, for he knew the ways of Zeus. Inachos rose out of his riverbed and rushed off to take revenge on the mighty thunder god. He flew at Zeus in such a rage. To save himself, Zeus had to throw a thunderbolt, and ever since, the bed of the river Inachos in Arcadia has been dry. Because Zeus vaporized the river god, so the river ran dry. Oh, good old lightning bolts solving all the problems, right? Or maybe not really, just solving Zeus's immediate problems. Hera was furious when she saw that Argus was dead and the cow Io had been set free. She sent a vicious gadfly to sting and chase the cow. To be sure that her faithful servant Argus would never be forgotten, she took his 100 bright eyes and put them on the tail of the peacock, her favorite. The eyes could no longer see, but they looked gorgeous, and that went to the peacock's little head and made it the vainest of all animals. I mean, can't blame the peacock for loving its own beauty, but yeah, it is sort of full of itself, isn't it? Maybe we can't blame it. Anyway, pursued by the gadfly, Io ran all over Greece, trying to escape from its tormenting sting. She jumped across the strait that separates Europe from Asia Minor, and ever since, it has been called the Bosporus, the cow ford. But still, the gadfly chased her all the way to the land of Egypt. When the Egyptians saw the snow white cow, they fell to their knees and worshipped her. She became an Egyptian goddess, and Hera now permitted Zeus to change her back to her human shape. But first, he had to promise never to look at Io again. Io lived long as the goddess queen of Egypt, and the son she bore to Zeus became king after her. Her descendants returned to Greece as great kings and beautiful queens. Poor Io's suffering had not all been in vain. You'll notice that this particular version really emphasizes the creation and the explanation for several things that exist, namely gadflies and how they are there to torment and sting cows. You'll also notice that the explanation of Egyptian kings and queens and then the beauty that came back from Egypt to Greece is also explained in this. The fact that the riverbed is dry, the Inachus River in Arcadia is dried up, is also explained by this myth. So there's a lot of expla- explanations for why things are the way they are. As the story is unfolding, it's giving us a history, it's telling us about characters, it's telling us about motives, but it's also sort of explaining so many other things. Uh, and of course, it ends with the beauty of the peacock's feathers, right, as well. And at least the image is there. That's what I'm referring to here, and just how beautiful that is. Hey everybody, welcome. We're going to read Hera, Goddess of Marriage. Should be pretty good. This is from the Napoli version. Hera was the daughter of Kronos and Rhea, so she had gotten off to a bad start, swallowed by her father and all. But she didn't think much about her early life, nor did she care much about the interminable war between the Olympians and the Titans that commenced almost immediately after she and her siblings were freed from her papa's belly. No, none of that mattered. Life really started for Hera when she put on her gold sandals and strutted before that brother of hers, Zeus. And, oh glorious moment, he looked at her in that way of his. She felt awakened, energized. He was a handsome devil, but oh, he turned out to be a troublesome devil. It would have been a jewel in her crown if she'd been his first wife, but then Zeus drank his first wife, that ill-fated nymph Metis, and they called her wise. Ha! So, no. Better not to have been the first. But then he went on to a Titan wife, with a body larger than his, imagine. And then another nymph, and then of all things, her own sister Demeter, and next he took Leto, the daughter of Titans? This devilish god was worse than a billy goat, and he was driving Hera to distraction. Most mortifying of all, that doe-eyed Leto bore him a son. It was Hera who should have borne his first son. Everything was going wrong. But Hera played it smart. No one should guess her smoldering anger. She wore an innocent maiden smile and carried herself as though basking in the admiration of the whole world. Everyone fell for it. She must be a beauty if she walked like that. And Zeus fell harder than anyone. He called Hera the most precious blossom he'd ever seen. She pinched her cheeks to darken them as if with the blush of modesty, and she looked up at him from under long lashes. He needed her. She wouldn't yield until he made her not just his wife, but his queen. Queen Hera, the only true wife of King Zeus. Zeus was hers, at last. And at the sidebar you'll see, vengeful, envious Hera knew how to play the blushing, comely bride. Selfish Zeus demanded any lovely he wanted. He crowned Hera queen, and they each got their just rewards. So, let's read a little further here in this myth and see just what those just rewards are being put on. But what did he do? Without missing a beat, he moved from Hera's embrace to the embrace of Maia, the daughter of that stupid Atlas, who bore the heavens on his shoulder girdle, and the granddaughter of Titans. Hera could predict the future. One simpering female after another in Zeus's arms. It was revolting, actually. She vowed then and there to have revenge on every single future rival into eternity. In fact, she would teach a lesson to anyone who helped Zeus meet other wives. Her punishments would be severe. They'd give pause. So there, Zeus. And then the very worst thing happened. Zeus had drunk that first wife, Metis, and no one had ever given her another thought. But now, so long afterward, Zeus doubled over in pain, and the next thing Hera knew, this thing burst from his forehead, a goddess in full armor. Zeus had given birth to his daughter Athena all on his own. Oh, that wasn't really the case. No one could believe that. A male had no such powers. Females were the ones who could have babies. Hera's grandfather had tried to stop her grandmother from giving birth by forcing the children to stay inside their mother. Hera's father had tried to rob her mother of the benefits of giving birth by swallowing her babies as they were born. And now, Hera's husband, who was also her brother and thus the inheritor of such malicious behavior, had claimed the ability of giving birth for himself. It was all part of one giant effort to strip women of their most important power. Ridiculous. Athena was the result of Metis giving birth inside Zeus. She was not the product of Zeus alone, no. Though every other insult was hateful, this one was truly intolerable. In a rage, Hera closed in upon herself, concentrating all her energies on one tiny dot within her. Her grandmother Gaia had done it before. Need. It was all a question of need. Hera practically melted with need, and yes, triumph. Life began within her, and this time, it really was all on her own. A woman could do it all on her own. Hera would give birth to the god Hephaestus, her first child, and the one that would be totally and completely hers. No matter what Zeus did, he couldn't rob her of that. And the sidebar here talks about Hera's revenge. This might sound familiar if you read D'Aulaire's version of the Hera myth. Hera was always furious at Zeus's romances. One was with the priestess Io. Zeus turned Io into a white cow to protect her from Hera, but Hera asked Zeus for the cow as a gift, and she made the giant Argus guard her. Argus had 100 eyes. Some eyes slept while others kept watch. Zeus had Hermes kill Argus and free Io. In grief, Hera set Argus's eyes in the peacock's tail, and she sent the gadfly to torment Io and drive her away. So, similar yet still different. And next up will be Hephaestus, god of metalworking. So let's start this time with the Napoli version for Hephaestus, god of metalworking. Hephaestus, god of metalworking. Hera, the queen of the gods, was angry at Zeus. I think we kind of got that picture already, didn't we? Since he keeps cheating on her at every chance he gets. Again, he was an inconstant and unloving husband, and she just about had it. Then he went and produced a daughter from his forehead, the pompous nitwit, so Hera decided to show him. She produced life all on her own too. Even when it was still tiny and nestled within her, she knew it was a boy. Ha! He'd rival Zeus' son Apollo. And then Hephaestus was born. Oh, Hera's face went slack. Oh, that tiny, twisted, shriveled foot. Her hand recoiled. She stepped away from the babe. This was too much to bear. Her first child, created solely from her, and now he was a weak, useless thing? This thing shamed her. It disgraced her. With a shriek, she grabbed the child by his pitiful heel and cast him out far, far into the wide and wild seas, forever lost. Oh yeah, that's I guess he didn't even have a face a mother could love. It's pretty rough. So he's twisted and malformed, so she casts him off, literally. Just tosses him off to the sea. Remind you of, no, anyway. But he didn't fall lost, despite Hera's wishes. The lovely silver-footed Thetis held out her hands and caught the babe. Her father was Nereus, the son of Pontus. Her mother was Doris, the daughter of Oceanus. Thetis was born to the watery world and knew very well how to manage life there. She enclosed Hephaestus in a bubble of her own breath and brought him to a sea cave where he grew strong in her love. The sea creatures laughed at his funny foot, and when Hephaestus was grown and walked haltingly upon the land with the help of the king, the land creatures pointed in derision. For they, with 2 legs or 4 legs or 6 or any even number, but who ever heard of a creature with 3? That maybe reminds you of the riddle of the Sphinx, right? It walks on 2 legs in the afternoon and 3 in the evening, right? That's with the king. So Hephaestus refused to be spurned. He had a good brain and strong hands and arms, and most important of all, he was his mother's son. He would find a way to be powerful. He would show the others. He searched the earth and came upon Lemnos, an island with a mountain that roared. You know, like a volcano? The soft sand beaches felt like silk under his weary feet. The many trees offered shade at last. He bit into olives fat with oil and loved the way it dripped through his beard. He closed his eyes and delighted in the twittering calls of the little owls. He threw rocks into the fire of the volcano and watched them melt. Ah, this was a good place. The fire would give him all the power he needed. Soon, he'd made himself a hammer, an anvil, and a pair of tongs. He set to work making things, anything he wanted. Armor and helmets and chariots. Before we continue on, I just want to take a look at this top part here, father of invention. If you look at this little sidebar, Hera scorned Hephaestus' shriveled foot. Others laughed at him. Ugly attitudes toward differences from the norm were common in ancient cultures. The early Israelites, for example, believed afflictions proved you'd done something wrong. Even today, some cultures believe that. But the ancient Greeks recognized a healthy mind regardless. Hephaestus is known as the father of invention. He made the first wheelchair, although the first record of a wheelchair used by a human was on a Chinese inscription from the 6th century AD. So anyway, to get back to the story, necklaces and drinking cups and graceful little statues. Then he made himself a chair with wheels so he could cross the land much faster. Everyone still poked fun at him, but they admired him all the same. They came asking him to invent things to meet their needs. He was generous and taught them how to craft things for themselves. Even Zeus came, and Hephaestus forged him a cape that served as his breastplate and came to be known as the Aegis, Zeus's symbol thereafter. A sea nymph named Cabiro fell in love with him, and they had 2 sons. Then he visited the island of Sicily, and the nymph Etna fell in love with him, and he fathered 2 more sons. Everywhere he went, someone loved him and someone bore him children. Sound like the father that he didn't have any part of in making him, right? But the one Hephaestus loved was Athena, the gray-eyed goddess, who was the very cause of his existence. She liked to come and work beside him at the forge. She crafted things for household use. But what she excelled at was making anything to help in battle. She invented the bridle, clever girl. She made a soft twitter sound as she worked, almost like an owl in love. And she ate olives like a glutton. What more could he ask for, right? For sure, she'd love him back. Females did that. Good luck, buddy. But Athena had no interest in any man, least of all a lame one. She spurned Hephaestus' advances and left him seething. Well, he'd show her too. He'd get himself a wife that was the envy of the world. Just wait. Hephaestus worked so hard to sidebar in the affections of Athena, he taught her to use the forge, where she perfected swords, shields, helmets, armor, everything to tickle a woman warrior's heart. I love that Athena. And the next myth that we'll cover from Napoli might just be Aphrodite. But for now, let's take a look at Delaire's Hephaestus myth. Hephaestus was the god of smiths and fire, was the son of Zeus and Hera. He was a hard-working, peace-loving god and was very fond of his mother. Often he tried to soothe her temper with gentle words. Once he had even dared to step between his quarreling parents. He sided with Hera, and that made Zeus so angry that he seized his son by the legs and flung him out of Olympus. For a whole day, Hephaestus hurtled through the air. In the evening, he fell on the island of Lemnos, with thumps so hard that the island shook. Thetis, a gentle sea goddess, found him all broken and bruised. She bound his wounds and nursed him back to health. Zeus forgave him, and Hephaestus returned to Olympus, but ever after, he walked like a flickering flame. His body was big and strong, and his hands were wonderfully skilled, but his weak legs could not support him for long. He built for himself 2 robots of gold and silver to help him about. They had mechanical brains who could think for themselves. They even could speak with their tongues of silver. They also served him as helpers in his workshop on Olympus. It was there that Hephaestus made the 12 golden thrones of the gods and their marvelous weapons, chariots, and jewels. He also had forges inside volcanoes on Earth. His helpers there were the one-eyed Cyclopes. They worked his bellows and swung his heavy hammers. When Hephaestus was at work, the din of the hammers could be heard for miles, and sparks flew out of the top of the mountains. All the Olympian gods were fond of Hephaestus and often went to his forge to admire his work. When Aphrodite, his lovely wife, came to his workshop to look at the matchless jewels he was fashioning for her, she daintily lifted her trailing garments out the sun. Very different version from the Napoli. I think you'll notice quite a few big differences, and one of the largest being who tosses him out of Olympus, and then the whole section in here about all the things that he makes. It's, it's pretty interesting, these differences. So I'm curious when you get to your writing task as to which one you preferred and why, and what you made of these differences. What do you think is being emphasized in one version versus the other, and how it changes the way we consider it, and what the lessons we're being taught from this might be.